Alia had always loved traveling. Even though she was only 18, the idea of flying to a new city made her heart race with excitement. Today was no ordinary trip. She was going to attend an important event, one that could open doors for her future. She had saved up for months and worked hard to get everything ready. Her luggage was neatly packed, her dress carefully chosen, and her hair tied in a simple bun. She wanted everything to feel perfect. When Alia arrived at the airport, the hustle and bustle of travelers surrounded her. Families were saying tearful goodbyes. Business people rushed to gates and children tugged at their parents' hands, whining about delays. The familiar smell of coffee and fast food filled the air, and the bright lights reflected off the shiny floors. For Alia, it all felt exciting, even a little overwhelming, but she kept her focus. She had her ticket in hand, a first-class seat that she had booked long in advance, and she walked confidently toward the boarding gate. The security check went smoothly. She followed the lines, placing her belongings in trays, stepping through the scanner, and retrieving her bag with a quiet sense of pride. She reminded herself that she was independent, capable, and fully able to handle this journey alone. She even smiled at a few people along the way, exchanging polite nods and greetings. The day felt perfect so far. Finally, she reached the plane. The first-class cabin was just ahead, separated by a small curtain from the rest of the seats. The plush leather chairs and extra space made the area feel luxurious, and Alia's excitement grew. She carefully approached her seat, her boarding pass ready. But before she could settle in, a flight attendant stepped in front of her. She was tall, with a strict expression, and Alia immediately sensed tension. "Excuse me," the attendant said, her tone firm but polite. "This section is for first-class passengers only." Alia blinked, confused. "I have a first-class ticket," she replied, showing the boarding pass, clearly displaying her name and seat number. The attendant glanced at the pass but frowned. "Are you sure? This ticket, did someone give it to you? First class is only for passengers who purchased it themselves," she said, her voice carrying an edge of doubt. Alia's stomach sank. She had expected maybe a friendly greeting or a quick check of her ticket. Not this. "Yes, I bought it myself," she said softly but firmly, hoping to end the confusion quickly. The attendant hesitated, looking her over from head to toe. Alia felt her cheeks heat up. She could sense the flight attendant questioning her, not just about her ticket but about whether she belonged here. The word stung, though she tried not to show it. Other passengers began to notice. A few whispered among themselves, glancing at the small scene unfolding near the first-class cabin. Alia felt a mixture of embarrassment and frustration, but she reminded herself to stay calm. Losing her temper would not help. "I'm sorry," the attendant added after a pause. I need to check again. You don't seem, I don't know, it's unusual for someone your age to be in first class alone." Alia's chest tightened. She had never faced this kind of doubt before. Most people simply assumed she was responsible and mature, but now she felt judged in a way that made her shrink inwardly. She forced a polite smile. "I understand. My seat is 1B, she said, hoping that would finally resolve everything. The attendant shook her head. "Please wait here. I need to confirm with my supervisor." Alia's heart sank further. She had been looking forward to this journey, and now she was stuck, unsure why she was being treated this way. She moved a few steps back, standing near the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the cabin. She watched the other passengers in first class, some chatting quietly, others reading or adjusting their seats, completely unaware of the tiny drama playing out near the door. As Alia waited, she tried to calm herself. She told herself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe the attendant had a bad day, maybe she was new, or maybe there was some rule she didn't understand. Still, the feeling of being singled out lingered. She hugged her small backpack to her chest and looked around, noticing a few curious eyes glancing at her. One older woman in economy whispered to her companion, "She doesn't even look like she belongs up there." Alia overheard it and felt a pang of hurt, but she didn't let it show. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had every right to her seat. She had paid for it, planned for it, and worked for it. No one could take that away from her. Minutes passed, and finally the flight attendant returned, accompanied by another crew member. They both looked serious, whispering to each other as they approached. Alia straightened her back, holding her boarding pass firmly. "I'm sorry for the wait," the first attendant said, avoiding eye contact. "You can go to your seat now." Aaliyah nodded politely, but inside she felt a mixture of relief and lingering frustration. She walked past the attendant and into first class, the luxurious chairs and extra space finally within reach. She sat down slowly, trying to shake off the earlier tension. She took a moment to breathe and straighten her dress, feeling the smooth leather beneath her hands. Even though she was finally in her rightful place, Aaliyah couldn't help thinking about what had just happened. Why had the attendant judged her so quickly? Why had others seemed to agree, even quietly, that she might not belong? She felt a wave of anger mixed with sadness, but also a determination not to let it ruin her trip. She pulled out a notebook from her backpack and started writing. Writing had always been a way for her to process her feelings, to put her thoughts in order. She scribbled down what happened, noting the confusion, the doubts, and the small judgments she had overheard. But she also wrote about how she had stayed calm, had not yelled or argued, and had finally reached her seat. As the plane began to taxi, Aaliyah watched the airport disappear beneath her. The engines roared, and she felt the familiar lift as the plane took off. She stared out the window, seeing the city shrink, lights flickering like tiny stars. Despite the rough start, she felt a sense of freedom and excitement. She reminded herself that this was her journey, her adventure, and nothing could take that away. A few passengers in first class glanced at her occasionally, and some offered polite smiles. She returned them, feeling a small spark of confidence. She had faced judgment and unfairness, but she had remained composed. That thought gave her a strange sense of pride. As the plane leveled off and the flight attendants began serving drinks and snacks, Aaliyah tucked her notebook back into her bag. She decided to enjoy the flight, to focus on the positive, and to prepare for the exciting event awaiting her at her destination. Yet a quiet curiosity lingered in her mind. She wondered if the flight attendant had realized the impact of her actions. She wondered if anyone would ever understand how it felt to be judged unfairly in such a public way. For now, though, Aaliyah looked out at the clouds, feeling a mix of determination and hope. She knew this was only the beginning of her journey, both literally and figuratively, and as the plane soared higher, carrying her toward her dreams, she silently promised herself that no one's assumptions would ever define her. While Aaliyah tried to shake off the earlier embarrassment, the plane hummed steadily under the clouds. She stared out of the window, watching the landscape shrink below her, trying to distract herself. She told herself to focus on the exciting event awaiting her, the opportunity she had been dreaming about for months. Yet a part of her mind kept returning to the flight attendant's words and the subtle judgment she had felt. She had always known that sometimes people made assumptions, but experiencing it firsthand in such a public way left her uneasy. Meanwhile, in another section of the plane, Leonard King, a man in his late 40s, settled into his seat in business class. Leonard was a self-made billionaire, widely respected in the airline industry. He had built his airline from the ground up, starting with a single plane and a handful of employees, and through relentless dedication, it had grown into one of the most reputable airlines in the country. He was known for his keen business sense, attention to detail, and commitment to treating his customers well. Yet behind the business persona, Leonard was also a devoted father. His daughter Aaliyah meant the world to him. Leonard's schedule was packed. He traveled frequently for meetings, expansions, and negotiations, but he had managed to carve out this rare day to accompany Aaliyah to her event. He believed that even a short journey together would allow them to connect and share a few quiet moments. He glanced at his watch and then at the aisle, thinking about the time needed for the event ahead. But as he made his way down the cabin, something unusual caught his eye. Through the gap in the curtain, Leonard noticed a small commotion near the first-class seats. A young girl stood awkwardly, clutching her backpack, while a flight attendant spoke to her in a firm tone. Leonard's instincts immediately told him that something was wrong. He observed silently for a moment, trying to understand the situation without alarming anyone. From the corner of his eye, Leonard recognized the girl. His heart skipped a beat as he realized it was Aaliyah. He felt a surge of concern mixed with curiosity. He had always known that Aaliyah was capable and independent, but seeing her in a situation where she appeared uncertain and uncomfortable sparked a protective instinct. He decided to approach quietly, taking measured steps down the aisle. As he neared, he overheard fragments of the conversation. The flight attendant was questioning whether Aaliyah belonged in first class, her tone suggesting doubt and disbelief. Leonard's brow furrowed. He had trained his staff to treat all passengers with respect, regardless of age, appearance, or background. The situation before him clearly violated that principle. Leonard reached the curtain and leaned slightly, making sure he did not intrude abruptly. He observed the flight attendant's demeanor. She seemed strict, almost defensive, but there was also uncertainty in her eyes. Leonard realized she had no idea who Aliyah was or the mistake she was making. He stepped forward gently and spoke with calm authority. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The attendants turned to him, surprised by his presence and tone. "This is my daughter. She is a first-class passenger and her seat is confirmed. There is no issue here." The attendants froze, realizing the gravity of the situation. Leonard's words carried weight, not because of his reputation in front of them, but because of the genuine concern he showed for his daughter. The flight attendant who had questioned Aliyah now looked flustered, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She had judged a young girl unfairly, unaware that the passenger was the daughter of the airline's owner. Meanwhile, Aliyah had not yet noticed her father. She was still processing the earlier tension, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She felt a mixture of frustration and helplessness. It had been difficult to stand up for herself, and now she wondered if things would continue to feel awkward for the rest of the flight. Leonard crouched slightly to meet her eye level and whispered softly, "Don't worry, everything is fine. I'll take care of it. Just stay calm." Aliyah's eyes widened in recognition and relief. She had known her father would handle situations with wisdom, but she had not expected him to intervene so quickly. She nodded slightly, feeling a wave of reassurance wash over her. Turning back to the flight attendants, Leonard spoke again, this time more formally. "Please ensure she is seated in her assigned seat immediately, and make her comfortable. I also expect that she is treated with the same respect as any other first-class passenger." His words were polite but firm, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The flight attendant, now fully aware of her mistake, stammered slightly, struggling to find the right words. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I mean, sir," she said, bowing her head slightly. "I didn't realize. I made a mistake." Leonard nodded once, acknowledging the apology. "Thank you. Just ensure it doesn't happen again." His calm demeanor diffused some of the tension, but the weight of the lesson was clear. The flight attendant looked genuinely remorseful, understanding that assumptions based on appearance or age could have serious consequences. Aliyah rose from her temporary seat and allowed her father to guide her gently toward first class. Other passengers, now aware of the situation, watched quietly, sensing the correction of an unfair moment. Aliyah returned to her assigned seat, her heart still racing but now accompanied by relief. She could finally breathe and enjoy the comfort she had earned. Once she was seated, Leonard stayed nearby for a moment, ensuring she felt safe and respected. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "It's not easy to face unfairness, but you remained composed, and that matters more than anything else." Aliyah smiled faintly, grateful for her father's support. She realized that the experience, though uncomfortable, had taught her something valuable. She had learned that judgment and assumptions often come from misunderstanding, and that staying calm and composed was a powerful way to respond. She also understood the importance of having someone to advocate for her when the situation was beyond her control. The flight attendants adjusted their behavior, now attentive and polite, ensuring that Aliyah had everything she needed. Drinks were offered with genuine warmth, blankets provided without hesitation, and small gestures of courtesy replaced the earlier tension. Aliyah observed the change, noting the human capacity for acknowledgement and correction. Throughout the flight, Leonard remained nearby but allowed Aliyah space to settle in. He knew that part of parenting was letting children navigate their own experiences, even when stepping in to correct mistakes was necessary. He reflected on the importance of respect, empathy, and awareness, not just for passengers but for everyone involved in the airline. Aliyah, meanwhile, began to relax. She looked around the cabin, taking in the soft lighting, the quiet hum of the engines, and the gentle smiles of other passengers. The incident with the flight attendant still lingered in her mind, but it no longer carried the same weight of frustration. She had been heard, respected, and restored to her rightful place. As the plane leveled off and the clouds stretched endlessly outside, Aliyah leaned back in her seat, feeling a sense of calm. She reached for her notebook and began to write again, documenting the events and her feelings. Writing had always helped her process experiences, and now it also served as a reminder of resilience and dignity. Leonard observed quietly, proud of his daughter's strength. He knew that one day she would face similar challenges without his intervention, and he hoped that today's experience would serve as a lesson in grace and perseverance. He also understood the importance of addressing mistakes directly and respectfully, turning a negative moment into an opportunity for learning and growth. By the time the flight attendants finished their service, Aaliyah felt a sense of closure. What had begun as an awkward and humiliating moment had transformed into a story of correction, respect, and personal strength. She realized that mistakes happen, people misjudge, and situations can feel unfair, but how one responds makes all the difference. The flight continued smoothly from there, with Aaliyah and her father sharing a few quiet words and smiles. The incident with the flight attendant had become a moment of reflection, both for Aaliyah and for those who had witnessed it. It was a reminder of the impact of assumptions, the power of advocacy, and the importance of staying composed in the face of misunderstanding. Aaliyah looked out at the sky, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. She knew that the journey ahead would be filled with opportunities and challenges, but she also knew that she could face them with grace and resilience. The presence of her father beside her, even quietly, offered a sense of security and reassurance that strengthened her for the adventures yet to come. Aaliyah tried to calm herself as she settled back into her first-class seat. Her heart was still racing from the earlier misunderstanding, but the presence of her father nearby gave her a quiet sense of reassurance. Leonard had returned to his own seat in business class, keeping a watchful eye on the cabin while allowing Aaliyah the space to regain her composure. She leaned back and exhaled slowly, her mind replaying the awkward moments with the flight attendant. She had expected the flight to be smooth, but a small part of her wondered if the tension might return. Even though the flight attendant had apologized, Aaliyah could sense that the woman was uncomfortable, perhaps embarrassed by her earlier judgment. The situation had been stressful, and Aaliyah knew that sometimes people carried guilt in ways that could affect their behavior. She decided to focus on herself, taking out her notebook to write down her thoughts as she often did. As she scribbled quietly, a few other first-class passengers glanced her way. Some smiled politely, as if offering silent support, while others returned to their magazines or conversations. Aaliyah appreciated the subtle gestures. They reminded her that the world was not entirely unfair, and that kindness could be expressed in small, quiet ways. Meanwhile, Leonard noticed the flight attendant moving through the cabin, her steps slightly hesitant. He realized that she might still be processing the situation and the embarrassment of having misjudged a passenger so significantly. Leonard believed in the importance of learning from mistakes rather than punishing them, and he made a mental note to address the incident constructively after the flight. As the plane settled into its cruising altitude, the flight attendant approached Aaliyah with a gentle, apologetic expression. "Miss," she began softly, "I want to sincerely apologize for the way I treated you earlier. It was wrong of me to question your seat and your ticket. I understand now, and I hope you can forgive my behavior." Aaliyah looked up at her, noticing the genuine remorse in the woman's eyes. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she replied, keeping her voice calm and measured. "I understand mistakes happen. I just want to be treated fairly." The flight attendant's eyes softened. "Yes, of course. I will make sure that from now on, you are treated with the respect you deserve." She lingered for a moment as if wanting to say more, then moved on to assist other passengers. Aaliyah returned to her writing, feeling a quiet sense of relief. Even though the immediate tension had passed, Aaliyah couldn't ignore the thoughts swirling in her mind. She reflected on the subtle biases she had encountered, the assumptions based on appearance and age, and the way people sometimes let their judgments cloud their actions. It was a harsh lesson, but she realized it was also an opportunity to learn about resilience and patience. Leonard, sitting nearby, observed his daughter with pride. He had always admired her composure, her ability to remain calm even in uncomfortable situations. He knew that life would present more challenges like this, and he wanted Aaliyah to understand the power of maintaining dignity while standing up for oneself. A few moments later, Leonard called the lead flight attendant to a quiet corner of the cabin. He spoke in a calm, authoritative tone, explaining the situation and expressing the importance of fair treatment for all passengers, regardless of appearance or age. "Mistakes happen," he said gently, "but we must ensure that everyone is treated with respect. Today your colleague misjudged a passenger, and it affected her experience. Learn from this and make sure it does not happen again." The lead flight attendant nodded, clearly taking the message to heart. She understood that this was not just a matter of policy, but of personal responsibility and awareness. Leonard's approach was firm but kind, emphasizing learning rather than blame. Back in her seat, Aaliyah noticed the flight attendant making small gestures to correct the earlier mistake. She offered assistance when needed, smiled politely, and maintained a respectful distance. Aaliyah appreciated the effort, recognizing that genuine acknowledgement and change were more meaningful than words alone. As the hours passed, Aaliyah reflected on how quickly situations could escalate when assumptions were made. She thought about other moments in her life when she had been judged unfairly and how she had handled them. Writing her thoughts in her notebook helped her process the emotions and turn them into something constructive. She realized that staying calm and composed was not only a way to protect herself, but also a way to influence others positively. Leonard glanced at her occasionally, noticing her focus and determination. He felt proud that she was learning to navigate the world with both confidence and empathy. He knew that one day she would face situations without his intervention, and he wanted her to carry the lessons from this flight into her own experiences. The flight attendant, now moving with more confidence, continued to serve passengers while keeping an eye on Aaliyah. It was clear that the earlier incident had left an impression on her, prompting reflection and self-awareness. Leonard had hoped for this outcome, believing that meaningful lessons often came from mistakes and the courage to correct them. At one point, a fellow first-class passenger leaned over to Aaliyah and whispered, "I noticed what happened earlier. You handled it very well." Aaliyah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Simple words of acknowledgement could make such a difference after a difficult moment. She smiled and thanked the passenger, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. Leonard watched quietly, appreciating the small moments of connection and understanding that were unfolding around them. He realized that fairness, respect, and empathy were not abstract concepts, but tangible actions that could shape experiences and perceptions. He hoped that Aaliyah would carry this awareness with her, applying it not only in challenging situations but in everyday interactions. As the plane continued its journey, Aaliyah began to relax more fully. She closed her notebook for a moment and gazed out of the window, watching the clouds drift by in patterns that seemed endless and serene. The tension from earlier felt distant now, replaced by a sense of reflection and calm. She thought about how quickly perceptions could change, how assumptions could mislead, and how a single act of understanding could restore dignity. Leonard, seated nearby, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The situation had been a test of patience and composure, both for Aaliyah and for the flight attendants involved. He knew that this experience would stay with his daughter, shaping the way she responded to similar challenges in the future. It was a subtle yet powerful lesson in resilience, respect, and the human capacity for growth. Aaliyah's thoughts turned to the journey ahead, both the physical flight and the path she was embarking upon in life. She realized that challenges and misunderstandings were inevitable, but they did not define her. Her response, her ability to remain composed, and her willingness to reflect and learn were what truly mattered. As the flight approached the halfway point, Leonard and Aaliyah shared a few quiet words. He praised her for her composure and encouraged her to see the situation as an opportunity for learning rather than frustration. "You handled yourself with grace," he said gently. "That matters more than the judgment of others. Remember, people will make mistakes, but how you respond can make all the difference." Aaliyah nodded, absorbing her father's words. She felt a quiet sense of pride in herself, recognizing the strength it took to stay calm and composed under pressure. She also felt gratitude for the guidance and support her father provided, understanding that having someone to advocate for her in difficult moments was a privilege and a lesson in itself. The flight continued smoothly, with Aaliyah feeling a growing sense of empowerment. She observed the flight attendants, noting the subtle changes in their behavior and the effort to treat all passengers fairly. It was a reminder that accountability, reflection, and learning could transform even uncomfortable situations into meaningful experiences. By the time the flight reached cruising altitude and service had settled into a calm rhythm, Alia felt a sense of closure. The earlier confrontation had been resolved, respect had been restored, and she had gained a deeper understanding of patience, composure, and human behavior. She leaned back in her seat, feeling both relief and quiet strength, knowing that the journey was far from over, but that she was prepared to face it with dignity. As the flight continued smoothly, Alia finally allowed herself to relax completely in her first-class seat. The tension from the earlier misunderstanding had faded, replaced by a quiet sense of calm. She looked around the cabin, observing the other passengers, the gentle movements of the flight attendants and the soft hum of the airplane. Everything seemed ordinary, yet she felt that today's experience had changed her in small but important ways. Alia thought back to the moment when the flight attendant had questioned her. She remembered the sharpness in the woman's tone, the hesitation in her eyes, and the subtle assumptions that had been made about her. At first it had felt humiliating, almost unbearable. But now, with the situation resolved and her father's quiet support nearby, she could see it from a different perspective. She realized that people often acted on assumptions without fully understanding the consequences. It was not always personal, and it was rarely fair, but it was a part of life she would have to navigate. She reached for her notebook, the familiar companion that helped her organize her thoughts and process emotions. Writing had always been a way for her to reflect, and today was no exception. She began jotting down what had happened, not just the events themselves, but how they had made her feel. The embarrassment, the frustration, the sense of injustice, it all poured onto the pages. But she also wrote about the calm she had maintained, the way she had held herself with dignity, and the quiet satisfaction of finally being heard. Leonard noticed his daughter writing and smiled quietly. He had always admired her composure, even at a young age, and moments like these reminded him of the strength she carried within her. He understood that life would present her with many challenges, some of which would be unfair or unexpected. His goal had always been to guide her toward resilience, empathy, and confidence, so that she could face the world on her own terms. The flight attendant who had earlier questioned Alia moved through the cabin with a new awareness. Her steps were careful, her demeanor more attentive, and she seemed genuinely reflective. Leonard noticed the change and recognized that the earlier incident had left a lasting impression. It was a lesson in humility and responsibility, one that could only come from recognizing the impact of one's actions. Alia observed the flight attendant, noting the subtle gestures of correction and respect. She felt a mixture of empathy and understanding. Everyone made mistakes. It was human. What mattered most was acknowledging those mistakes, learning from them, and ensuring they did not happen again. She realized that her experience, though uncomfortable, could serve as a small example of how confrontation, patience, and grace could transform a situation. As the hours passed, Alia reflected on her father's quiet intervention. Leonard had approached the situation with calm authority, correcting the misunderstanding without anger or humiliation. His approach had been firm but respectful, and she recognized the power of such behavior. There was a lesson here, not just for the flight attendant but for herself. Leadership, influence, and advocacy were not about force or loud words. They were about understanding, patience, and careful guidance. Alia also thought about the passengers who had witnessed the incident. Some had whispered, some had stared, and some had smiled encouragingly. Each reaction carried meaning. She realized that people were often caught in moments of judgment, observation, or support, and that small actions could make a big difference. A polite smile, a nod of acknowledgement, or even simply remaining calm under pressure could influence the energy of a room or a cabin significantly. Leonard, meanwhile, reflected on his role in the situation. As a father, he felt a natural protectiveness toward Alia, but he also knew the importance of allowing her to face challenges on her own. He had intervened only when necessary, ensuring fairness and respect without taking away her personal agency. It was a delicate balance, one he hoped she would understand and carry forward in her own life. Alia looked at her notebook again and wrote a few lines about empathy. She realized that the flight attendant's behavior had been influenced by assumptions, perhaps biases and human error. It was easy to judge, easier still to let prejudice guide actions. but it took strength to recognize mistakes and correct them. She felt a small surge of hope, knowing that understanding and reflection could lead to change, even in moments that felt unfair or discouraging. During the flight, the cabin slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Passengers were reading, conversing quietly, or resting, while the crew attended to their duties with renewed attention. Aaliyah noticed a small gesture from the flight attendant, an extra blanket offered without prompting, a polite smile, a sincere check to ensure everything was satisfactory. These small acts, though subtle, carried weight. They reminded Aaliyah that respect and acknowledgement could be expressed in actions as much as in words. Leonard occasionally glanced toward his daughter, feeling proud of the way she had handled herself. He knew that resilience was built through experiences both challenging and rewarding. Today had been a test of patience, composure, and understanding, and Aaliyah had risen to the occasion. He hoped she would carry these lessons into other aspects of her life, recognizing that challenges often contained hidden opportunities for growth. Aaliyah, noticing her father's quiet observation, felt a renewed sense of confidence. She realized that facing unfair treatment with dignity and grace was not a weakness but a strength. It allowed her to maintain control of her emotions, to reflect thoughtfully, and to influence the situation positively. She had learned that people's judgments did not define her. Her actions and responses did. As the flight continued, Aaliyah also reflected on the broader implications of what had happened. She thought about biases, assumptions, and the importance of equality. The incident, though small in the grand scheme of things, had highlighted a truth she had always believed, that everyone deserved respect, regardless of age, appearance, or background. She felt a growing determination to carry that understanding forward in her life, to advocate for fairness, and to remain mindful of the subtle ways that assumptions could influence behavior. Leonard, observing quietly, knew that these reflections were important. Life was filled with situations that could test character, patience, and empathy. The way one responded to such challenges often shaped both personal growth and the impact on others. Today had been a microcosm of these lessons, and he felt satisfied knowing that Aaliyah had navigated it thoughtfully. The flight attendant, now fully aware of her earlier mistake, continued to perform her duties with care. She treated Aaliyah and other passengers with renewed attention and respect, demonstrating that acknowledgement and reflection could indeed change behavior. It was a reminder that even in professional settings, human understanding and compassion were essential. Aaliyah felt a sense of closure. The confrontation had been resolved, respect had been restored, and the experience had become a lesson in empathy, patience, and personal strength. She looked out the window, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced judgment, remained composed, and seen the situation transform through understanding and advocacy. As the flight neared the halfway point, Leonard leaned toward his daughter and spoke softly. "You handled everything with grace. Life will challenge you in ways you cannot always predict, but maintaining your dignity and responding thoughtfully will always serve you well. Remember this moment." Aaliyah nodded, absorbing her father's words. She felt grateful not only for his guidance but also for the experience itself. It had been uncomfortable, yes, but it had also provided a powerful lesson in resilience, fairness, and the quiet strength that comes from composure. The rest of the flight passed without incident. Aaliyah continued to write in her notebook, capturing her thoughts and reflections. She felt a growing sense of confidence, knowing that she had faced a difficult situation and emerged stronger. Leonard watched quietly, proud of the young woman she was becoming. By the time the plane began its descent, Aaliyah felt prepared for the journey ahead, both in terms of the event she was traveling to and the broader lessons of life she had learned. She understood the importance of fairness, the value of empathy, and the strength that came from remaining calm in the face of judgment. When the wheels touched down, Aaliyah and her father exchanged a quiet smile. The flight had been more than just a journey from one city to another. It had been a lesson in human behavior, patience, and understanding. Aaliyah knew that she would carry these lessons with her, ready to face future challenges with confidence, empathy, and composure. As the plane began its final descent, Aaliyah sat quietly in her seat, feeling a sense of accomplishment mixed with relief. The earlier tension with the flight attendant had long since faded, Replaced by a calm awareness of the lessons she had learned, she reflected on the entire experience, from the initial misunderstanding to her father's quiet intervention, and finally to the flight attendant's recognition of her mistake. Each moment had contributed to her growth, shaping her understanding of patience, resilience, and empathy. She watched the city lights grow larger as the plane approached the airport. The familiar glow of streets and buildings filled her vision, reminding her that she was returning not just to a physical destination, but to a deeper understanding of human nature. Life often presented unexpected challenges, and today had been one of those moments. Yet she realized that challenges could be transformed into opportunities for learning and self-improvement. Leonard, seated nearby, observed his daughter with pride. He had always known that Aaliyah possessed a quiet strength, but witnessing her navigate this difficult situation reinforced his admiration for her composure. He reflected on the importance of guidance, empathy, and intervention at the right moment. Today had been an example of how small acts of support could make a significant difference in someone's life. The flight attendant who had caused the initial misunderstanding moved through the cabin one last time before landing. Her demeanor was calm but attentive, a reflection of the lessons she had internalized. She offered polite assistance to passengers, ensuring their comfort and safety. There was a quiet respect in her actions now, a clear contrast to the earlier judgment she had displayed. Aaliyah noticed the subtle change and felt a sense of closure. It was evident that genuine reflection could lead to meaningful change. As the plane touched down smoothly, a gentle cheer of relief seemed to pass through the cabin. Passengers began gathering their belongings, preparing to disembark. Aaliyah adjusted her bag and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of satisfaction. She had faced an uncomfortable situation, maintained her dignity, and witnessed a positive transformation in those around her. The experience had been more than just a flight. It had been a journey of understanding and growth. Leonard stood and offered his hand to Aaliyah. "Ready to go?" he asked with a warm smile. She took his hand and nodded. As they walked toward the exit, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. She understood that life was full of unexpected events, and that the way she responded would define her character more than the events themselves. Once off the plane, Aaliyah and Leonard moved through the airport, passing travelers and staff who greeted them politely. The incident on the plane seemed like a distant memory now, softened by the lessons learned and the growth that had come from it. Aaliyah realized that even moments of discomfort could become powerful teaching experiences if approached with reflection and composure. During the short ride from the airport, Aaliyah continued to think about the flight. She considered the flight attendant's behavior, recognizing that assumptions often guided people's actions. Yet she also saw the value of accountability and reflection. The woman had acknowledged her mistake and adjusted her behavior, demonstrating that change was possible when approached with humility and awareness. Aaliyah felt a sense of hope, knowing that human behavior could improve through understanding and conscious effort. Leonard glanced at his daughter and spoke quietly. "You handled yourself exceptionally well today. Life will challenge you in ways you cannot always predict, but your composure and reflection will carry you far. Remember, the way we respond to unfairness often teaches more than the event itself." Aaliyah nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, Dad. It wasn't easy, but I feel stronger for having faced it." She smiled faintly, a sense of pride mingling with relief. She had learned that dignity, patience, and empathy were powerful tools, even in moments that felt unjust or uncomfortable. As they arrived at their destination, Aaliyah noticed small details that had gone unnoticed during the flight. The careful attention of airport staff, the polite gestures of fellow travelers, and the general calm of the evening. These small observations reinforced her growing understanding of human behavior. Life was full of people who acted thoughtfully, and she wanted to contribute to that positive energy wherever she could.